and I shoot myself in the eye.
No, you didn't.
I did. Well, okay, let's just get real here. The first nail went past my face.
And then
every logical person would have stopped, assessed life, decided what's going on with life, and then grabbed the ladder. But no, I'm like, I think I got it this next time. And so the next one.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Efficient by Design podcast. My co-host, as usual, is Dustin High, and my guest today is John Dennis. We knew each other for a period of, maybe a year and a half?
I think it was only a year and a half, yeah.
Back in, this had been
2001.
2?
Yeah, 2001 is when I first met you.
Yeah. So we framed together for a company, a production framing company in Edmonton, for a year and a half together. I was with that company for about 3.5 years in total, three and a half years. And then you carried on once I left, and then you stuck around with them and then went on your own and family, and we kind of fell out of touch.
Yeah.
We never really touched base. Once I left, I think I hadn't talked to you at all.
No.
So you currently now have JTD.
JTD, yeah.
Construction. So
JTD Contracting is funny. Honestly, probably one of my biggest regrets in company is that I named my company JTD. And it's not because of what it stands for. It stands for me and my wife, which is John and Tanya Dennis, but it does not roll off the tongue. And so It's like over the phone, people are like, oh, JBD. And I'm like, and I used to bank with CIBC. And so I'd be like, no, it's like JTD, like TD Bank. Anyway, I ended up banking with TD Bank now just as a... JTD. As soon as I said JTD, TD Bank. Oh yeah, okay, we get it. Anyway,
but the J throws it off.
The J throws it off.
TD.
Let's just face it. It should just
nice.
be TD. TD Contracting. It's all Tanya's anyway. So
if you had to do it, if you had to name it again, what would you do?
Oh man, I don't know if I would. That's a funny question. I have no idea. I've never actually thought about it. See, maybe I've thought about why I don't like that name, but I've never thought what it would be again. So I have no idea. But it was because of our old boss that we used to work for. That style is why I went with it, because he just had initials for his company too.
That is the common thing, is you do the initials.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the initials, or it's whatever's going to be top in the phone book when we used to use those.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
ABC Construction or Ace
Triple
Builders.
Triple
A. All of those.
Ace
Builders.
Ace Builders.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when Dustin, when you and I started our company, that was a big part of the initial setup. Was like, what do we want to call it?
Yes.
So I'm like, I didn't want to do Luke Reamer Construction, Luke and Dustin Construction, LD Builders. I didn't want to do something like that. I'm like, I want to have something that's timeless. So I had this like idea of what I wanted. I want something that represents something. And then being that Dustin is like far more an artist and I don't know, your diversity to like look into those things and find cool words and synonyms for things. You kind of went to work and then dug up this Greek word, Akribis.
Yeah.
That's cool. I had no idea that you were behind that.
Yeah.
It was just it is a little bit of a, I don't know, sometimes it's annoying about myself, like to always be trying to find some meaning in it. Sometimes people are like, look, bud, you don't have to find meaning in every stupid little thing. So in the case of us trying to find a name, that's fun for me, trying to find stuff that has significance to it, rather than just, you take half of Luke's name and half of Dustin's name, Lewin or Dasuk Construction, which I know so many guys who've done that.
Yeah.
Two guys who start a company and they do that. So we wanted something a little bit different, and finding that was fun. But we worked we did flooring at first, and nobody could say Akribis. They thought it was weird. So they just called us Greek boys. Greek boys flooring.
Greek boys flooring.
Yeah.
And they would assume we were Greek or something.
And the artwork that you put together for it and the font that you developed
Yeah.
was really this cool kind of Aztec cool font. But the way that when you look at it quickly, people see it and they're like, Akribis is what they see. So Akribis we got called all the time. And I actually, in more recent years, like 6 years ago, in my initial interactions with Mark Martinez,
Yes.
we had some big discussions, and And that wasn't always easy, but one of the things he was like, you got to change your company name. This name's stupid.
Wow.
It's like, this
Crazy.
is hard to say. It's confusing. I'm like, it's got history. I've got a reason for wanting to stick with it. Once you'll become aware of it, it'll be fine. But so we've had lots of pushback, but I've been fine to kind of stand my ground on it because I love what it stands for, which is accurate, precise, level, exact, punctual, true, all things that we're always shooting for when we were building, and then as well with tool belts. So yeah, we worked together for about a year and a half. I'd been with that company for a few years. I'd been framing for probably 4 or 5 years by then. You came on fairly green.
Oh man, yes. Like in fact, it came on like grass seed. So I had been working with. So just real quick, I actually had. There's no carpentry in my blood. If my dad is a jack of all trades, and if there was a trade that he was not good at, it was carpentry. And so there was no carpentry in my blood at all. I was going to be a welder. Automotive and welding is my thing. And if Luke actually remembers, at one point in our history, I actually brought his car over to my dad's place and I redid his brakes on his car. And he was actually kind of blown away because he was just like, it's actually really, I remember him saying this, and it was a huge confidence booster for me because I saw him as this framing god. And I only say that because there was a guy on our site that we worked with that would refer to himself as a framing god, and he was not a framing god. But I saw Luke as this framing deity, and I just wanted to be this framing guy like Luke. But he wasn't automotively inclined. And he's like, man, my brakes are squeaking and stuff. I'm like, oh, dude, I'll come fix all those for you. Don't worry. New brakes, new rotors, we do the whole thing, new pads. He's like, you can do that? I said, I can do that. And it won't even take long. Pulled into the shop, redid all his brakes for him. And he's like, dude, this is really some cool perspective. Like, I like you. You're a hard worker, but you don't really know a lot about framing. And now to see you just be able to do something that I can't
in your element
do. Yeah. And it just gave me a confidence booster as like someone that I was looking up to. But anyway, so I was not looking at carpentry. I had come from a guy who was building shops, agricultural stuff. He had shut his business down, and I had just recently been married, and I got to provide for a wife, and whatever. So I was like, man, I got to find a job. Like I can't be without work, and so I was just driving around Edmonton, and I saw this project, and I drove on and found the foreman. And
okay, that's crazy right there.
I've got some questions.
Driving around, you're like, I don't have a job, so you drove around.
Yeah, I drove around.
Nobody probably has any idea what that even means anymore, to drive around and look for a job. Because you're just going to be on your phone, who's got jobs, or talk to people that you know. The fact that you drove around to physically look for work.
And I went to a couple of sites, and they were residential sites. And the first question I got asked on the first site, he's like, hey, do you smoke pot? And I was like, no. He's like, well, we don't want you then.
No. Actually?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Okay, I'm moving on, like whatever. So I stopped at a couple places, and then I ended up at this commercial site. And I asked for the foreman's number, and he gave me a number to a guy that owned the framing company, and I called him up, and he says, how much experience do you have? Well, at the place that I've been working, they called us framers. So as far as I knew, I had almost a year experience. And he says, well, what are you making? And I says, I'm making, I think I was making $11 an hour. That's what I was making, $11 an hour. And he says, okay, I got no problem. I'll pay you $11 an hour. You can start tomorrow. Oh, great. So I come.
How old are you then? Like, how old are you now?
20. I'm 42. I'll be 43 in a month.
Okay, so yeah, I'm a couple years older than you, and you were married already.
I was married. Yeah, I had just been married since that previous November. So I was maybe, what was that, from November to February. I was 5 months married, something like that.
5 months fresh.
Yeah, and
still married to the same woman.
Still married to the same one. 4 kids. 23 years this year. So, and she's been my biggest cheerleader, biggest support.
Well done.
All the way through.
We're all 4 kids.
Yeah.
What, you just celebrated your
20th,
and I'm at 23.
Cool. 23 this year.
Already passed.
Okay, you're going on 24 this year.
Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah.
So you walked onto that crew.
Walked on that crew, and eyes green as grass. In fact, there was a guy there that everybody knows if he worked on that crew. His name was Mike, and he's like, "I'll take you under my wing." And I was like, "Oh, this is fantastic." Well, I found out very soon that was not the wing I wanted to be under. and I needed to get from under that wing. But at that point, that guy knew more than I did about framing.
What a nice guy.
He was, man,
Such
he
a
was an
gem.
incredibly nice guy. And so I ended up framing away, and the guy who hired me, he came up to me after the first week and he says, "You suck." And he says, "If I knew that you were this bad, I would not have paid you the $11 an hour that I agreed to on the phone. But I'm a man of my word." So he's like, I want you to have a shot here. But you got 3 months to impress me. And if you don't impress me in 3 months, you're out.
And I can vouch for you in the sense that, like, you were like reliable, keen, optimistic,
Sure.
eager like crazy, almost annoying. Just like he is just all over it. He wants to impress everybody. He's working his
Yeah.
tail off. He's reliable and he's optimistic and positive. Which on a framing site,
Sure.
that goes a long ways because I mean it
yeah.
wore on me on that particular crew because
Sure.
it was just pessimism and
So
abuse
much.
all the time.
And see, I didn't know. See, I'd come from I was raised up like a super conservative Christian. I'd never even heard my dad yell. You got to understand, like, I never even heard the male authority in my life yell. I'd never been yelled at that point in my life. So, like, man, I was in for a culture shock when I went on. And then the crew that I went on was owned by like the first job was owned by one of the elders in the church that we were at. So, like, it was just a super chill agricultural, small family business, 3 guys there. And so when I went onto this framing crew, I was like, it was culture shock. Like, I was like, I learned words that I didn't even know existed, and then they were used as profanity, you know,
Or measurements.
or measurements, often measurements. And I was like, what am I? It's just a small increment. Okay, guy, don't let it, you know, anyway, it's just so, anyway, whatever. Anybody knows what I'm talking about. But
Yep.
at the end of the day, I remember my favorite guy, he actually took me under his wing after a year of being there. His name was Tom. And he didn't even give me the time of day for the first year. And then after almost a year to the date, he came over to me, extended his hand, and he says, "I'm Tom." I said, "Yeah, I
Wow.
know." He's like, "Well, I only bother investing in anybody if they stick around for a year. You've been here for a year, I'm going to teach you everything you want to know."
Because that's a big deal. Sticking around on a framing crew for
Yeah.
a year
It's a big deal.
is actually a big deal.
It's a big deal.
So was that after I left? Was that still?
I'm trying to think of timeline with you because like we did a lot, but I feel like our timeline with you must have been only, like you said, a year and a half.
Because Tom is one of the guys I remember so well working around because he was this kind of wily old veteran guy.
You were still there because him and Matt did a lot together.
Okay.
And he liked Matt. Somehow
Yeah.
they could, And so it was right in that time. So it was that crossover.
I remember Tom was he like long, almost like a perm, long curly hair.
Mullet.
Mustache, he had wicked mullet. He drove this old Ford truck with a spare tire mounted to the grill.
Yes.
The
Okay,
camper
now
on
I'm
the back.
remembering Tom.
Yeah, camper in the back. And he
Yeah.
wore the same pair of gray sweatpants with a big tear across
Pretty
the
sure
knee.
he still has them.
Yeah.
And he was always this like rogue guy working on his own.
Yeah.
He'd just be given jobs. He'd knock them out of the park.
Yeah.
And I remember him building, we prefabbed all the decks.
Yeah.
I remember him building all the decks. We'd crane them into place.
Yeah.
And I remember him,
Yeah.
he was the only guy I've ever seen do it, snapping lines by himself without setting nails or
Yes.
anything. He had one of those old aluminum chalk lines. What was that? What brand was it? Do you remember? Ancient.
Starrett? Is
Yeah.
that?
I think that's
Yeah.
right. And he'd
Yeah.
pull it out. He'd pinch the end with his little finger.
Yeah.
He'd stretch out diagonally across the sheet. And then he'd use his index finger and his thumb and he'd snap it in place. He could snap diagonally. And he was super fast. And he had the old Makita saw. And at break time, he'd just unbuckle the belt and throw his hips. So the whole thing would just like fly across. At break time, tools spill everywhere. He was like this carefree
His
going guy.
pencils were this long. He had cardboard in the bottom of his. I know you guys produce it. You guys are tool belt manufacturers. So you know all the names. Is it Coonies or is it Cunnies?
I always said Coonies.
Yeah, I did too. So he had the little Coonies apron, not even the 651, but like the child's one.
yeah.
And
Yeah, tiny thing. And the funny thing too, our buddy Matt that you grew up with,
Yep.
who is this like, you know, this physical specimen, jack dude, hit the gym all the time, super eager, keen. At one time, Tom's wife or girlfriend,
Sure.
common law, whatever,
Yeah.
she came by and she was this like bombshell.
yeah.
And Matt was just like,
What?
Tom is the man.
Ripping around with his camper.
Hey, I totally had a blank because I worked on the same crew for a short period of time. But you describing him, it's totally like the old filing cabinet. That folder is dusty. and the Tom folder is out now, and I'm like, oh yeah,
That was the guy.
That guy was a beauty.
So Tom was a big inspiration.
He was a
and
big
support.
influence in my life. In fact, Tom actually and I, we've done lots even since then and worked together in different things. But anytime that I would be showing, you mentioned that chalk line trick. I mean, I adapted it. I use it. It's all the time. I never even think about it. And I'd be showing someone.
It's hard to do.
Well,
At first,
I mean,
anyway.
at first you don't.
Not if you're good enough.
But I mean, yeah, right. And so and he'd walk over. I taught him everything he knows.
Yeah,
I taught him everything he knows.
yeah.
Yeah, no, lots of. So anyway, so that was a long convoluted thing to say. Like, I never was going to get into carpentry. So when I got hired on, I was green as grass, and I joked around like grass seed. I honestly, like that guy Mike. He was teaching me things that I never even knew existed, and so yeah, I came on green as grass. I didn't really know anything about what I was doing. And I don't know, like I didn't know at that time if I wanted to be a framer. I was already registered for first year. That was something I kind of felt that I wanted to do. And, but I loved watching things come together. I think building apartments was hard for me, until I got a little bit more, but the best part about it was the repetition. There was so many things. I mean, Odin taught me so many things. And, yeah, the guy taught me so many things about framing, and things that I teach today. Like I remember I was production framing, and I put nails too close together. Like this is a common thing guys will do. They'll be framing interior walls, and they'll have their nails in the bottom plate, but they won't even have like an inch between them. It's like bang 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 bang. And he'd come over, he'd be like too close.
Yep.
Or another one, we'd be nailing a post to have 6 plies for a big load bearing point load, and I'd have 2 nails in each stud. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, you're shredding the bottom plates. He's like, you don't need 6 nails or 12 nails in a 6 ply. He's like, put 4 nails, 5 nails, you're good. It's not an engineered spec. So I remember but you could never impress this guy. Yep. So we had stood walls. He knew it was my unit, and I'd been framing for him for a while now. He came to me, he grabs one of my studs and he reefs on it, and it doesn't go anywhere. And he's like, good job. Yep. This looks good. And then he moved on.
Yeah.
And he was previously a drywaller in his younger years. And so he was thinking about framing for the benefit of the drywallers.
Sure.
So, and he was always super good at scribing with his tape and his pencil.
He taught me that too.
So we picked all those things
with
up.
the knife
Yep.
and the tape.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I remember times with him driving the Zoom boom, and he was never on the tools, or rarely on the tools.
Rarely.
I worked a few weekends with him doing some special projects and different things. But I remember one point, I hadn't really seen him on the tools, swing a hammer or nothing.
Sure.
And we were trying to nail something together. He's in the Zoom boom, getting impatient, waiting for us to finish something. No. And he comes storming out of there. He's like, give me your hammer, give me some nails. And it was just like, set, drive. Like, holy crap, this guy's like a machine. He can hold his own for sure. So I was super impressed.
That is a classic move, though. When you're in the Zoom boom and the guy that's working for you is pissing you off and not going fast enough, and you get out there, I'm going to get out of the way. Bang, bang, bang. And then the hope is, though, that you really impress the guy.
Yeah.
And make him feel like, no, this is how you do it. Yeah. Like I remember, one of our bosses doing that, but with windows. Like you're fussing with the window, and he's like, get out of the way. Picks up the window, walks up the ladder, puts it in, pulls out the nails, bang, 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 bang. That's how you do it, and then storms off.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up this kind of intro part, just to explain to people how we got back in touch.
Yeah.
Too, because I want to go back into how you ended up finishing up on your own, going on your own eventually. But when I left, we didn't touch base at all.
We didn't touch base at all.
Until 3 years ago?
Yep. 2021, 3 years ago. Yeah.
So how did that come about again? Because I don't even quite remember.
Again, like some of these details doesn't matter, but it really resonated strong with me that when you left, that you were going on a missions trip. And that was really cool to me.
So let's touch on that for a second too, because on that crew, I was a person of faith, grew up similar to you, and I was a loner on that crew.
Right.
Like I was it. I was the only guy that had a kind of faith, and it was a hard place to work. It was a thankless, I was like, man, it's hard to stay positive and optimistic. So that was a breath of fresh air, having someone else like, hey, here's another person that doesn't have everything all figured out, but they have like intentionality and motivation, accountability. So that was great. And you and I worked together quite a bit.
We did,
which was really enjoyable. So yeah, there was that background.
Yeah,
and I really appreciated that that presence and camaraderie on the site. For
Yeah,
sure.
and so I remember just thinking, man, this is really cool. This guy's taking a trade that he's, and we'd shared enough stories back then, like you'd been different places in the world using your trade, and then for me it was just huge that you were going to do this, and then I had just heard through the grapevine that you had decided to stay and you were gonna help your dad build his house and a few things, and I'm like, man, that's really cool. And then to be honest, a couple other kind of guys came on I'd met at school, and that's kind of how the framing industry is, and all of a sudden I had a new bunch of guys that became that crew, and that crew overnight changed. It was not the crew that it was. Like, in fact, inside of 6 months, the only guy that I can remember the two guys that would have been the same was the boss's son-in-law and the guy that we mentioned, Tom. Those are the only two guys.
Mike was gone too?
Mike was gone too.
Huh.
Yes.
Wow.
So
Because that was the same bunch of guys that they worked for like 3 years there.
That's right. And that was the thing that blew my mind. I think we were joking around, and how like that crew when I got there was like 13 guys strong. And at one point it was 3.
Wow.
And I was like, what happened? But that's the industry. So going back to how you and I reconnected. So, I mean, obviously, I was ambitious. We had a boom on our side. I mean, so when I left him, I want to say I wasn't pregnant. That'd be wild. But my wife was pregnant with the first kid, and I'm going to take a little bit of ownership in that. But that was 2004. So she was born in January 2005. So this is June of 2004. I'm finished second year intake, and I come in and I give my notice, and I've decided that I'm going to go on my own. So first stage of going on my own was I hired myself as a subcontractor to another framer. And that's actually where things took a massive turn for me. That guy, even though the first boss that we were talking about, he was a little bit on the wild side. He actually he was really a forerunner in safety and in protection of his employees. Even though I didn't see it then compared to some of the other companies that I worked for after, he really was. And so I went to this other smaller crew and framing with this guy, subbing myself out at $17 an hour, GST number, which wasn't actually that great, but and that's just something you find out too. Like when you start over. You got to prove yourself again. This guy had some air tools, and I won't mention the brand because I don't think it's a brand issue, but the safeties were broken. So you had to hold the trigger down in order to shoot the nail out. And this was a
You could only bump fire them?
You could only bump fire them. But this is and this isn't even the fault of the nailer. This is inexperience. This is overconfidence. Like, there's a time in every framer's, especially if you're young life, that you think you know enough. And at that point, when you really should be like putting your heels in and learning more. Like if you think you know enough, push yourself to the next level to know more confidently about what you're doing because you're not ready to go off on your own. But anyway, I'm nailing a pork chop or a cornice return, bird's box, whatever you guys want to call it. I'm nailing this on to the porch veranda roof. I'm kneeling on the drop 2x10 beam. I'm reaching out and I'm putting the 512 triangular piece on the back side on the underside of the fascia. And I'm bump firing like this. And I shoot myself in the eye.
No, you didn't.
I did. I shoot myself in the eye. Well, okay, let's just get real here. The first nail went past my face.
And then
every logical person would have stopped, assessed life, decided what's going on with life, and then grabbed the ladder. But no, I'm like, I think I got it this next time. And so the next one, and I just gotten out of Nate, like I had said, and at Nate, they had said that our glasses were good enough for safety glasses. And in a shop sense, sure, sawdust and whatever, but on the site sense, not the case. And the ones I was wearing were Ray-Bans prescription sunglasses. They're made out of glass. That nail hit my glass lens and it shattered that lens, and the glass went into my eye. Had the nail gone into my eye, the doctor said I probably would have just died because it would have just gone boom through my brain, done. So if you know how the nails come out of an air gun, they don't come out like in the movies, like a bullet. They tumble. So the truth is that nail probably hit me like this. So if I hadn't been wearing the glasses, I probably would have had a black eye. And it would have been let's reassess life and let's move on.
No, you would have said, I got it the third time.
Yes! Yes, oh wow. I hope that's not true. But either way, there's a possibility. Anyway, shatters the glasses. Instantly, I just feel wetness and I can't see. And I'm thinking I'm bleeding. And so the kid that's helping me out, I'm like, hey, go get the boss. And you guys got to help me off this roof. And so anyway, I thought for sure my framing career was done. I just started on my own. And here this happens. Well, my dad I had surgery, a bunch of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Can't see out of my left eye other than like in front of my hand. I can see. I still have peripheral, a few things. But so, yeah, I have done my entire career as a framer on my own with one eye, which is kind of crazy. And I've used it as a bit of a, if I can do it with one eye, you can do it too. Let's get after it. Wow. Anyway,
so you can't actually see out if you close.
So right now, if I close this eye, right now I cannot make out I can make out that you're a human. That is, I can't even tell that you have headphones on right now.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's still something there, but.
That sucks.
Right. So, that being said.
How long after having gone out on your own was this incident?
2 weeks.
Oh.
2 weeks. Yeah. And actually a bunch of the guys, true. There was one other guy that was still on that crew, and he was the Odine's kind of right hand man, okay. the foreman. And he heard through another guy that I had shot myself in the eye. And he's like, oh man, that really sucks. Like that guy was going to go somewhere and this could be a deal breaker. That crew, that big crew that we had too, had one major incident right after us. And one of the guys fell 4.5 stories, shattered his heel. That's it, which is amazing. But he shattered his heel. That was it.
That could have been us. When I was first there,
raced
oh my goodness,
on those walls. No tie off.
No ties, no railings.
We raced. We were running. It was actually a thing of pride that we could run.
And I love that about it. This is dangerous, and we're good at it.
We were good at it. We were good at it. So anyway, moving on. Boom. I partnered up with a guy, and I had already decided. Framing was my love. Like this is what I was doing. It's all. Honestly, guys. Like I'm not gonna get into it all, but like I dropped out of school. I went back and finished things up, like high school. But like man, when I hit framing, like. Something happened and I knew this was for me. Like I was good at it. I loved it. I wanted to learn. Like I wasn't intimidated by it. And it just seemed like it was a culture where people wanted to teach you. I've never been in a place where so many people were eager to teach me instead of telling me that I was unteachable. Like in school, I just felt like, you don't know how to learn. Like that's all I ever heard growing up in school is like, this isn't how you do it. If you're not going to do it this way, you're never going to get it. I come onto a framing site and I've just got like all these people want to teach me stuff, almost to a point where I'm like, who do I listen to? Like I remember every crew I went on to, forget everything you know, we're going to teach you this way. Forget everything you know, we're going to teach you this way. Anyway, so and of course, and I leave and I'm like, I'm going to be that guy who's going to teach guys the right way. And then you find out really quick, man, this is a hard task. And who do you teach and all this kind of stuff. So fast forward through basically 20 years, I had all sorts of different sizes of crews. I had one guy to like, I think my max 10 years ago was like maybe I think I had 8 guys, 9 guys. Tom actually helped me with that stint. He came on for that project, helped me out. And I'd recently got into Instagram, and a buddy of ours that we have in common had said, hey man, I know you're in construction. I've seen all this stuff that you do. You got to check out these tool belts. Now, I've been a Cadillac guy all the way through. Like when I got introduced to the Cadillac pouch and the stiletto hammer, I started losing money because I just started buying pouches and stiletto hammers for all my guys, giving stuff away because I was like, this is the best stuff. And I was a firm believer. If I'm going to teach guys and invest in guys, I want them to have good tools. To this day, I'm still that way. One of the things that we do, if you've been with me for a year, you get a stiletto hammer. No questions asked. Like, here you go. You've earned your right to stiletto hammer. And now, thanks to Luke, one of the things we're doing too is after a year, we're giving them an Akribis tool belt.
Wow.
And it's a big chunk of money. Like a hammer and a tool belt. I don't let them just like pick their full rig. I personally give them the belt that I like, and I give them a front warmed B Max Mini. That's what I love. I think it's a great belt for a guy to get introduced to, and if they want to go from there, whatever they want. All right. So anyway, so he says, hey, you got to check out these belts, and I'm just like, man, I just been introduced to Diamondback, and I'm like, Diamondback's where it's at. Like, this belt's so light. I love this thing. And then I think it was later that year we'd gone to a camp, and another guy says, hey man, you're on Instagram. He's like, you got to check out my buddy. He builds these tool belts, because he knew that I was in construction, whatever. And so he shows me this post, and I'm like, I recognize that guy. Okay, listen, guys, I don't think I've even told Luke this, but like, hey, the Luke that I remember looks like this today. Not quite, like he wasn't quite as good looking back then as he is now, but this is, but the Luke that I saw in that post, I'm like, that's like a fat Luke. And I'm like, what happened to, but I know that's Luke. And so, anyway, so I was like, huh. And then all the stories kind of start putting together, and I'm like, okay, yeah, because my other buddy said, yeah, this guy owns a framing company. He's got a bunch of guys, like 10, and now he's making tool belts for them, and he's trying to sell these tool belts, and this is like really top end stuff. And then I start looking at this page, and I'm like, wow, this is some pretty cool stuff. So, and I'd been back and forth on belts, and my back is getting worse and worse over the years, and the only belt that I could really wear without hurting my back was a 651 Cooney's front apron, but I hated it because there's no organization. It's like, you know, I can, my square goes in and it falls out. My hammer goes in and it stays, but that's about the only thing that stayed. Everything else is like falling out. And even the Cadillac, and I hated too, and I've made posts on my page about this. I hated how I'd put this thing on and like, you're pushing it against with your thighs. And I actually think it's hilarious because I talked to you about this, unless you want to change your story, but I was like, man, like I think it's genius how you space the pouches. And you're like, dude, that was actually kind of an accident. You put the clip on, and because you're so into symmetry, which I agree, it forced the bags apart that I put that belt on and I was in love. I have never, ever, and this isn't trying to like boost up Akribis, but I have never, ever put on another belt. I have fallen in love with belts for how they look. I have never, ever fallen in love with a belt for how it's felt outside of Akribis. Like, I don't pride myself in wanting to wear a belt for 8 hours a day, but that one I can wear for 8 hours a day. I get in my truck, other parts of my body hurt, but not the part that is just dying because I'm wearing a tool belt all day. So anyway, so we started connecting a little bit on Instagram, and then a couple of years ago I said, hey, I want to come down, I want to see you. And that was kind of where we kind of picked up again. To just
touch on my fat version, because that was now like 5 years ago when you would have come across that.
Yeah.
And like there was probably a period of like, I don't know, 5-10 years where, I was about 30 pounds more than I am now. Wow. And I kind of fluctuate a bit. And then, it was probably like 3 years ago that I'm like, I need to make a bunch of changes.
Sure.
You know, it was like I was 41. I'm like, if I want to do the things I want to do.
Which is awesome, by the way. I think it's so good.
Yeah, it's going to change. But it's funny, when I go back to those earlier posts, I'm like, oh. I'm like, I'm all got stung by a bunch of bees or what's going on? Yeah, it's awesome. So that was our kind of reconnection. Yeah, no kidding. And then to kind of hear your story of what you'd kind of been through and what you're doing now. To go back a little bit now, you touched on pieces of it, but why you went out on your own, and kind of what if we go through the history of your working career, why you went on your own, the projects you started with, and then where you're at now, what your hopes are in the future. Right. Because it's become, I've become very aware that, you're a highly sought after framer in a large center, and you stay very busy, and that doesn't happen by accident. Yeah. Most framers, like my experience through framing for 25 years, was that there was a couple guys that seemed to be busy most of the time. When things got really busy and there was lots of work around, all these other crews would pop up in the big fancy trucks, and they're like, oh, I guess those are the guys to be. And then a year and a half later, they're gone. They're bankrupt and gone. And it's kind of weeded down to the foundational guys. And I fortunately was one of those guys who worked through recession. We stayed busy nonstop. Yep. So I know that, for someone to be a framer over the long haul, that's no accident.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious to hear, like, for starters, what was it that was the catalyst for you to step out on your own? And, the environment that you and I worked in, the negativity and the reality of that situation. Yep. I really took stock of a lot of that when I was working there, because I was always looking at, not that I was wanting to have my own company at some point, But I always thought, if I did,
Yep.
what things do I want to bring from here that I want to adopt to my own practices, and
Sure.
what things do I want to have nothing to do with?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a lot of both,
Yeah. That's good.
right? So what was your kind of transition from working in that crew and then wanting to go off on your own, and then the motivation for that?
Man, it's so funny. I think first of all, I remember looking at some of those guys that ran those crews, and they're the age I am now, and I remember thinking like, man, those guys, they're at where it's at. And I remember when our boss bought his second Zoom boom, and then he drove up in his Jaguar. I was like, okay, I think it's time for me to leave. And you know what? Wrong reasons. But yeah, I think money was a big one. I think I recognized that I was married. I wanted to have a family, and trying to go up the ladder at $1.50 a year wasn't where I saw it was going. And of course, the grass always looks greener on the other side of the fence. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was that. I think also too, I think there's just, I don't know, there's an entrepreneurial spirit in a lot of guys who become framers. And in fact, I'll get into that tiny bit later, but like now as I own a business, I spend a lot of time reading into people. I want to see where their path and direction is. And I've actually spread my business out. I've got a lot of different options of business. I have employees, I have subcontractors, I have sub crews, because I don't think that there's just one method that I can necessarily build culture with if I'm just going to say this is the only way that we do things. But that's a little later. But regardless, I also didn't like the negativity. And I mean, I don't want to get into a lot of details, but man, like that's the only place as a grown man I've gone into my car and cried. Like, man, like some of the things that were said and the way that they tried getting production out, like it made me feel like I just was like a piece of garbage. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, like I want to be able to run this, and I had this belief, and I think it's still true to a point, but reality also helps you see some things too. But I had this belief if you just treated people nice, that they would want to work harder for you. Mm-hmm. And there's some truth to that. Sometimes people just take advantage of you too. But regardless, like there's a balance in all of it. But a lot of my drive was I just really wanted to have an environment that we worked hard and we had fun. And I knew there was good money to be made. Like there was no question. And when I started on my own, it was 2006 boom. It doesn't sound like a lot right now, but we were making $650 a square foot. And my partner and I could smash a house out with a helper in 8-9 days. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, PO on that, like we were each taking home like, I don't know, $25,000-$30,000 a month, mm-hmm. and for our companies, and we're like, this is freaking amazing. Like, mm-hmm. So it went to that. Like we didn't start like that, but anyway, so he left. I've had a couple partnerships break up. One was with my dad and one was with him. And both of them left because they said, hey, you work too much. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that they were upset at me working too much. They were upset that they didn't feel like they could put in the same amount of time. And they didn't want it to be something that would end on a sour note later, that I'd be coming after them saying, hey, I've put all these hours in and you're mm-hmm. taking half. And so they decided to just cut clean. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like there's been lots of different, but my biggest thing, like I've loved, my favorite thing is I love watching guys get it. We've had, I think now I've had eight guys gotten their journeyman ticket through my company. Right now I currently have 6 guys in the apprenticeship program, all at different stages. I'm not a massive, huge believer in having your ticket to be a carpenter. But I believe there's 2 roads that you can do in framing, and that's you can run your own business or you can be a ticketed carpenter. But if you're not going to get your ticket, then every single place you start, you're starting over. And I just don't want that for any of the guys that work for me. So I push hard. I also think that there's a buy-in process that's needed. And when guys are investing, I help them out with school. I help them with all these different things. But I believe when they buy in, they commit, and they can commit to an actual 4-year process. What we've seen in results is guys staying around after is substantially longer than just hoping guys are going to stick around for the long haul. So I'm a big believer in guys going to school and that kind of stuff. But yeah, as far as some of that stuff goes, like I mean, that was the reason behind it, the drive behind it. We were talking earlier about names maybe before this podcast started, and one of the things that I've realized over all of the things that I've done is I currently have more vision for where my company is going today than I ever did at any point of when it started. I think there were so many times it was just like survival. It was just like, I remember even 4 years ago, somewhere around that time frame where you and I first reconnected, actually, it was at that same guy that kind of showed me Instagram, and I'm like, oh, that's Luke. It was at that same camp, and I had this epiphany, and I realized, like, I was trying to do some inner searching, like, where does this drive come from? Because this isn't necessarily a healthy drive. But I mean, at that point, I've already got like 4 kids. I'm married, like, you know, I'm established, and I still just have this underlying, like, I've got to get out there, and it's hard for me to take vacations. And I realized, like, you know, watching my dad go bankrupt as a kid, there's just a lot of fear of failure.
Yep.
And really that's been, and so I realized, when I realized that, I'm like, man, like, this is not going to take a business into the top margins. Like, fear never takes anything into the top margin. It might let something continue go for a long time, but it's not gonna have anything, like, nothing that's running scared grows into something strong.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, okay, I can no longer have this as my drive. And that doesn't mean I'm not afraid of failure. I'm still afraid of failure, but I've changed my perspective on what failure is. In fact, I believe that failure, and I tell this to all my guys that work with me, failure is not making mistakes. Failure is not going bankrupt. Failure is refusing to process and dissect and learn from what happened so you can't become stronger in the future. So basically, making a mistake, ignoring it, and moving on is the closest thing you're going to find to failure. Other than that, everything else is part of life. And so as of right now, my vision, where we're going, what I want to do with my business, yeah, we're in an area where there's so much work and it's so good. To be honest, like, that's a very kind word to say. I'm a highly sought after framer, and good grief, anybody that can show up for 6 days a week and put houses together is sought after in Edmonton.
Yes.
Whether your quality is good or not. But you were right. The quality does allow us to continue doing the buildings consistently year after year after year after year, and guys keep calling us, and that's something that I think is something we have to continually keep an eye on, because as our business expands and as it grows, the first thing that tends to go with it is the quality. And so, you know, the processes and systems, it's part of the reason why we're actually here, is that I respect you as a framer long before I knew that you built tool belts. And so when I see processes that you've put into place to build tool belts, I know that those processes have evolved from framing, from systems. And I know that it's just easy to just try to hope that the systems are just going to create themselves. Well, they never do. People will create broken pieces of systems, but if those systems aren't regulated any way, there's no way to teach it. And so one of my biggest things right now is, like, this is a wild thing, and I don't know how it's ever going to come into play, but I really hope that I am one of the key pieces in Edmonton's framing demographic to revamp how framing's taught in Edmonton. I think it's so broken right now, even with the apprenticeship program and everything. And I'm actually looking at ways that we're going to be, even with inside of our own company, building a actual training program that guys buy into, that will include the apprenticeship program, because I want them to get their ticket in the end, but an actual structured way that guys can mark their learning curve. And everybody learns at a different rate, and I get that. But man, I have guys, like I was talking to Dustin yesterday, and I got guys that have been with me 7 months, and they are learning at a rate that I've never seen before. But it's not sustainable. And so I just that's my real vision. My vision is to see and be a part of training guys, because as much as I see that we have a housing crisis in Edmonton and we need more houses, we've got a labor crisis everywhere. And I, you know, we joke around about these old guys that just run around like crazy men. But I'm like, man, like, they went through seasons of boom, seasons of recession. Sometimes their businesses were making money. Sometimes they were leaning on the money they had made just to keep the businesses running and hope that it was going to happen again. And I've been through all that. And man, when you're just trying to, like, make it, the last thing you're thinking about is, how do I teach that guy to be the next me?
Yeah.
We're not thinking that.
Just surviving.
We're surviving, right? And so I'm hoping, and again, it's hopeful thinking right now, but, like, there's been a lot of things that have helped us get there, and I'm hoping I can start seeing some of that stuff happen as we're growing and as we're implementing these systems and these processes, that guys buy in at a stable rate.
As a snapshot of kind of the last, say, 20 years,
Yep.
like just give us a quick rundown of like the size of your crew and the sort of projects that you were doing
Sure.
from 20 years ago till now.
Sure. Single family houses, 1,500 square feet, 3 guys. We do multifamily now, 4 to 8 plexes. We're even looking at doing some miniature condos. We've got 4 crews. We're just starting our 5th crew here next week. These crews range anywhere from 4 to 10 guys. Right now I think we got 25, almost 27 guys on payroll. And but we've got leads for all those crews. Some of our projects now too, like I got 2 crews that don't even just do strict framing. They do aspects of framing on condos that is rehab stuff, like renovation stuff. So rebuilding of decks, changing out windows, like air barrier, building envelope, all this kind of stuff. So we have a couple different areas that we're pushing into, and that's partly because I've been part of the boom and bust Edmonton for so long that when you're just trying so hard to be in one specific area of framing, as soon as things start going down, the prices go down with it. Yeah. And so this other industry is necessary because there's a lot of rot, there's a lot of things that have to get fixed, and it's not provided by the same bank account, so to speak, in the industry. It's so
you're diversifying.
We're diversifying up to a portion right now. I'd say we're like a 70-30 split. We got 30% in some of that diversified stuff and 70% still in production framing. And right now in Edmonton, it's heavy. It's heavy. Everybody, as many hands on deck that can frame are framing, and that's what we're doing. And so
what was the size of your crew or crews, say, 3 years ago?
3 years ago, 3 guys.
Okay. Wow. So that I'm sure there's a big fluctuation over the last 20 years.
Yeah, last 20 years, like I said, there has been, like I said, but it's funny, right? Yeah, it's just, again, we go through these booms and these busts and hoping guys are going to take the mantle and go, and then I don't know, they get smart and they don't shoot themselves in the eye 3 times. They go on to a different career. But I think we had 3 or 4 guys 3 years ago, and we were doing custom homes.
So before then, say the previous 15 years, was there times when you had more than one crew, or did you not really go into multiple crews until the last couple of years?
Last couple of years, yeah. Okay. We tried one other time to go into multiple crews, and I probably didn't give it a long enough experiment. The rates weren't great, and that crew for 4 projects just broke even. And so I just kind of felt like it was a poor investment of expenses for having a Zoom Boom tools, to have guys just breaking even on 4 jobs. I just thought, hey, you know what, there's too much risk involved here. And so we brought that crew back together and then took on some bigger projects together.
So what was it over the last 2 years, 2-3 years that allowed you to actually have more than one crew step away and have that be profitable and see it actually grow? Like what I know for me in my history of building, I got to the point where I had 2 or 3 crews, and a dozen guys, and that was like in my story was a very, very strategic shift in my thinking and preparation, and pouring into my guys how I'm trying to train them. And for me that basically revolved around, this company can't be relying 100% on what I do and say in every aspect of every single build. I actually have to pass the mantle on. I have to pass on responsibility to somebody else, which is a really, really hard thing to do when you're like, it's my name on it. Yeah. Right. So that was something that was a very strategic shift for me. Was that similar for you?
It is. So like people, right? I mean, that's what it is. We're always looking for those people. So I had a young guy come to me 5 years ago, and he went through the NATE program, different than my other guys had. He took a whole year.
Explain what NATE is.
So North American, what is it? North American
Institute of Technology.
There we go. And
trade school.
Yeah, it's trade school. And so they got dozens, hundreds of different programs, in fact, for every trades and all sorts of different things in business. But in the carpentry apprenticeship program, you can go about it 2 ways. You can get hired on as a green guy, and then your employer can vouch for you. You can get signed up with the apprenticeship board, get your blue book. He signs for your hours, and then every 10 months essentially you go for a 2-month intake. 1, 2, 3, 4, and along with those hours, you get your fourth your journeyman ticket. Now, there's another way you can go about it. You can just go to NATE straight, and it's a 8-month course, and it's like schooling and hands-on tools, and you get the equivalent of your first year with a bunch of extras. But then you've got to go and work for an employer for 6 weeks for free, or they can pay you. And then that's how you get your equivalent first year. And if they want to keep you on, then you can continue to take your apprenticeship through them. So this young guy reached out to me, and honestly, again, I was like, 6 weeks for free. I mean, how bad can it be? And so he came on board with us, and I was like, man, this kid is really good. He's really aptitude, but it wasn't honestly, it wasn't his. I wasn't attracted to his work skills. I was attracted to how he took correction and how he worked with people. And later on, him and I had lots of discussions, but one of the things that had contributed to it was a couple of things. And this is really, I have to be careful how I say this, but a lot of guys in the trades don't grow up with families that have two parents. And so you got a lot of guys that just like struggling families, struggling homes, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of the things that was attributed to him is he had two parents. His parents are both teachers, and he was highly involved in sports. And so he was very used to teamwork and team atmosphere. He was very used to having being scrutinized by a coach. He was very used to being never feeling like he had arrived. It was always like as soon as he got to a level, then the coach was taking him aside and saying, "Hey, you're going to the next level." Thing is, he was kind of off limits to me because he came to me, and this is the other thing I loved about him is he knew where he was going. He's like 19 years old, and he already had his whole plan laid out for him. He wanted to get his apprenticeship, get his ticket. He wanted to go back to school, become a teacher, be a shop teacher, and PE teacher. And I was like, dang. I'm like, yeah, cool, let's do it. And so I didn't really actually think that he was going to be with my company more than the 4 years because he had his kind of life set out for him. And so anyway, a couple years in, and he came to me and says, hey, I think I'm changing my life goals. He's like, I'm not sure that I can do the teacher thing. Not because I don't want to teach, just because of where politics are with everything. He's like, I'm just not sure if my values align with all of that. What would it look like if I stayed here at JTD? And all of a sudden a light switch hit for me. And I was like, what would that look like? What are my visions? What are my plans? Where do I want this to go? I literally have someone knocking on my door saying, hey, if you have a vision for where this thing's going, I want to know what it is, and I want to see if I can line up with it. So that's kind of where things started. And I said, okay, I need you to learn every aspect of this job. And you know all about floors and walls, but you don't know enough about roofs. So for the next 6 months, you're my roof guy. And so I got him to the place where I could trust him with all aspects of framing. And then I said, okay, let's see what the next year. So this last fall, he's finishing up his 4th year. So I brought him on as a kind of a buy-in program, and he became my partner. So we have an agreement that we've worked out that is going to take 4 years as a buy-in process. And at the end of it, then we're 50-50 partners in everything that we're doing. And he comes to me last fall and he says, hey, I screwed up. He's in school. He's in his 4th year. Like, I'm thinking, hey, things are great. Like, as soon as he's out of school, we're splitting up into 2 crews and we are going. Like, this is the thing we've been dreaming for the last 2.5 years. We're ready and we're going to go. And he says, I screwed up playing basketball and I tore my ACL. And I don't know what to do. I think I'm out. Like, I said, what are you talking about? There's no way you're out. I said, we waited way too long for this moment. He's like, I can't even be on site anymore. Like, I'm not even supposed to be framing. Like, but he's wired way too much like me. Probably broke the rules more than he should have. But he started running his first crew with a freaking knee brace on and going to physio. And we did it. And we lost a bunch of money on that first build. And everything started switching in my brain because that statement, we lost a bunch of money on our first build, isn't actually true. We did. Physically, we lost a ton of money. But my brain started changing, and I realized that this was an investment project. And I had to invest into this. And I couldn't keep going back to these guys and saying, hey, we're losing money. This is an investment. It's costing, I'm investing into this individual. There's a price that has to get paid here. And it's not going to just happen overnight. And so I looked at it and I'm like, hey, you know what? That was a great project. You did fantastic at it. No, we didn't make very many margins for profit, if any, but let's get you onto a different project. And put him on another project, and all of a sudden things started to click. And I watched him as he took 3 guys. It turned into 5 guys, and all of a sudden, okay, you got a 5-man crew. And so we worked like that for a bit, and he's like, hey, we got surgery coming up. And I said, hold it off as long as you can. We've got to get another crew lead underneath of you so that when you're off for surgery, he can maintain your crew. And so the guy is diehard buy-in, and he had a surgery date come up a month early. And he called me and says, hey, I already know your answer, but I got to give them an answer. Can I take the surgery or not? And I'm like, dude, we need this month. And he says, okay, I'll wait. And we got that other crew lead to a place where he could manage his crew. He went for surgery. And all of a sudden then we know we've got 8 months to 12 months before he can actually get back on the tools. And so he's in a position now where we've sat down, we've navigated. He's running 10 of our guys. Essentially we put 2 crews together and he's managing it. And I'm managing the other kind of 15 between 3 different crews that we're doing. And so, I mean, it was exciting. Like, that was a lot of growth. I mean, I missed out a few tiny things in there because this has really all happened in the last 12 months. So I thought, hey, you know what? Like, I got to get back on the tools in a real fast, hard way. And I did. And then proceeded to fall off a building in December, break my foot.
We got to talk about that for a second. Because we have a mutual friend that I think is responsible for this craziness.
You know what? Listen, it is what it is. But, like, if you're in the trades as long as anybody, your body starts to fall apart. Yeah. And so I had done a little stint. And I guess I left kind of a major part out. A year and a half, 2 years ago, I started a side company building rig mats. Now, rig mats really have nothing to do with carpentry other than the fact that you use lumber and you use saws and you use, power tools to put them together. But it's a massive production. But we were running, at one point, 15 guys in that shop building rig mats. And I was
rig mats are?
Oil field wooden pallets, essentially, that big equipment drives on when it's in marshland,
garbage ground,
whatever. And environmental too. Like, there's a lot of rig mats that are used all over the places because now we want to protect grass, we want to protect parks areas, these kind of things, et cetera, et cetera. But so anyway, there's a need for it. And after COVID, a lot of these rig mats that are made out of wood were rotten. And so there's a massive demand, especially for the pipeline projects and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so through some contacts, these guys knew that I did carpentry and had guys, and it kind of blew up, and all of a sudden we had 15 guys building these rig mats, and it was a hands off, but it was a flash in the pan. It was all of 11 months, and it was all over, and it was a lot of money invested, a lot of time invested, and in fact I look back on it after, I'm like, man, like, what did I do? Like, that, what a waste of time and money. Like, but it solidified some things. Number one, I'm like, hey, if I'm diversifying, I'm not diversifying that hard, because it's too hard for those industries to come together. But what it showed me is, like, man, if I trust some people, the right people, and I give them the ability to expand and grow some stuff, some things can happen really big that I don't have to be so controlling. So this actually was a massive thing helping me see what I needed to do in my framing company. So now bringing back to present date, so I got him busted up with an ACL, but he's trying to figure some things out. This is like October, December. I'm running a crew, he's running a crew. And like I said, that crew isn't actually making profits, but we're investing into a structure and an idea. But I still got to make money. Like, we got to figure things out. So I'm just running like a wild man. And my tendonitis in my right hand really starts to flare up to the point where I can't even hold my saw. So I'm like, whatever. I've been through this kind of stuff before. No big deal. I know everything in framing. How hard could it be to just train my left hand how to... Dustin's already just like, dude, there's no wonder you shot yourself in the eye. Like, you are not very bright. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to order up a left-hand rig from Akribis.
But what someone else we know did this previously. So
absolutely, right? And so I'm like, hey, if he can do it, I can do it.
You can mention him.
Absolutely. You know, come on, Dad's the siding guy. Like, I mean, he's crazy this way. And I think you guys even had him here, right?
Yeah.
And
we visited lots, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like, man, I'm watching Des all over Instagram, like, do left-handed stuff, and I'm like, I can do this. This is not gonna be that hard. So I tried doing it without even changing my rig up, but that particular rig had the sleeve in it, so it was super awkward to, like, take hammer from the left, put it back into the sleeve. I'm like, I want to have a left hand, and I'm always a sucker for buying a new tool belt. Like, this is not hard for me to convince myself to buy a new tool belt. So I ordered up a new tool belt, boom, pushed by, knowing this thing's going to be in the mail here in a couple weeks, and it arrives, and here I am. I got my left-handed rig, and I'm framing this floor, and it's I've shared this on my Instagram. Anybody can go back and look at it. It's an embarrassing story, to be honest, but I'm cutting off joist ends on a cantilever, and a cantilever is just a portion of the floor that carries past the wall, and it's not even a large cantilever. It's a 1 foot cantilever, and so In this case, I was actually how I had marked, because again, you don't realize when you're trying to train for your left hand how many things that you actually have to train. Not just training a hand, you're training your whole body.
Yeah.
And so I had
And
marked
your approach to a job
yes,
too.
it's
Squaring lines on the opposite
so
side.
frustrating.
Yeah.
So like I had marked all of the joists on the side that I would have marked if I was
Right-handed.
cutting with my right hand. So now I'm walking backwards, which is not that big of a deal. I'm walking backwards, watching what I'm doing, and and I get to what we would call an offset. So an offset is where the joist changes its pattern of layout so that it can accommodate for plumbing. So, but the saw wouldn't fit between. No big deal. You can cut on the other side of the joist. And so, had this been a conventional situation, I would have been cutting with my right hand, doot. I would have turned around, I would have thrown the saw in my left hand, and I would have cut it with my left hand. But because my brain was so adamantly saying you can't use your right hand, since I'm now cutting with my left hand, the procedure would have been cut, turn around, throw the saw in the right hand, and cut. But my brain's like, you can't use the right hand.
Okay.
And in that split-second decision, I obeyed my brain, and I used my right hand to brace myself on the piece that I was cutting off
No.
and proceeded to cut it off with my left hand.
Ugh.
And as I'm in the air falling, I'm already giving myself heck. I'm like, you idiot. Like, what are you doing? Like, and then I'm like, wait a minute, you got to find a place to land, bud. And so,
First floor moving?
hey,
You're one floor up?
yeah. So I was on the second floor joist. So
Okay.
I was just over 10 feet
Yep.
off the ground. So 10 feet basically to where I hit the precast step. Not
Did
on
you
the
go
flat.
down head first? Because you're like leaning on your hands.
I know,
so-
but you know what? Like one of my guys, he saw, he's like, "Yeah, man, you were like a cat. You were like an eagle." He's like, and it's actually pretty incredible how your body responds. So like,
It
I
is.
was already at a diagonal, but somehow I had forced my body around, and I was trying so hard to miss the concrete step because I knew that if I could just land on the dirt, it would be way easier than anyway. I totally nailed the step on the edge of the step, and then rolled down to the next step, and then proceeded to fall kind of onto my hands and knees. But I was wearing my hard hat. So, and I was wearing knee pads, which actually,
Wow, really?
yes. So like very minimal damage. Like my one wrist on my left hand took some beating, and my knees were fine. But I knew my foot was hurt.
Did your hard hat stay on?
My hard hat did not stay
Okay.
on. No chin strap. So as soon as it's gone, eh? And anyway, so I get up. Actually, no, one of my guys ran around, and he's like, don't get up. And I'm like, dude, I'm fine. You're not fine. You literally just fell off the building, dude. I'm like, I'm fine. I just got to get up there and finish it off, and we'll be good to go. He's like, no, just chill out. So I chilled out for like maybe a minute, and then I got up, and I'm like, I just got to walk this thing off, man. Like, it's a sprained ankle at best. Like, we're good to go. So I'm hobbling around on this thing, trying to get it to like, reset itself.
Walk it off, yeah.
And there's just something inside me is like, dude, this isn't walking off. Like, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over to the truck, sit down, take some water, wait for all my guys to go back to work, and then I'm going to get the heck out of here. I'm going to go to the hospital or wherever, Medi Center. So I did. And you know what? There's some logic kicked in. Like I went to the gas station and grabbed some ice because I knew I'd be sitting in the waiting room for a while. And I was able to get the swelling down pretty good. But yeah, it was totally broken. So broken in two places. But man, like even in that, such a blessing. Like not displaced. So nothing moved. No surgery needed. I heard the words of the doctor saying, 3 weeks, you're good to go. That's all I needed to hear. My wife's like, there's no way he said that. Like, she works in a field of medicine, and she's like, 3 weeks is when he wants you to go back. 3 weeks, you're not going back to work. Like, get that out of your head. But it's over Christmas, and I had been planning on working through Christmas. So I had to sit at home and ice to sing and take care of it. And so 3 weeks goes by, and sure enough, he's like, oh, no, you're not going back to work, dude. Like, you got another 4 weeks of sitting at home. And so those 7 weeks forced me to look at all of the inefficiency that I was pulling behind me. And it was scary. And I was like, but I've never seen it. I've never been able to see it because I'm always out in front, running as hard as I can, wondering why there's all this, no one can keep up, let's say. And I'm sitting there in my truck, and I'm like, we got to make some changes. And some of those changes were hard. I had some hard conversations with some of my high paid guys. And I says, guys, we need to figure out how to get you guys back on track because you're not putting out with where you're getting paid. And we've got a lot of imbalance. We had way too many green guys versus experienced guys, just wrong organization. And sometimes information is amazing. Sometimes it's incredibly overwhelming. And I realized in that moment, I'm like, I have two options here. I can quit or I can fight in a different way I've never fought. And it was really good for me because physically I could not get back on the tools and go and try to make it happen.
Yeah.
And you know what the coolest part was is after I was allowed to get back on the tools, I was already in a rhythm of changing things, making things more efficient, and putting guys where they needed to be.
Right-handed tool belt and tools again?
Right-handed tool belts and tools again. You know what? One of the guys that was gonna borderline, he was on the fence whether he wanted to keep on with us or not. I said, listen, you got some decisions to make. I really want you to go through this apprenticeship program. I want to invest in you as a person, and I want to teach you construction after. I says, but if you decide to stay with us, I got this beautiful left-handed setup.
A little bit of blood on it, but other than that, it's like new.
So, anyway, so I don't know exactly where I think I got a little bit off course there, but yeah, that was bringing us up to speed. But yeah, your question was what happened there. But that fall and my partner's wrecked ACL actually were the two things that forced him and I, because we're wired way too much the same, it has forced us to look for the strength in our people and forced us to build team and build people together and teach them the trade as we're building the teams together.
Yeah. And you're saying so you had to have some hard discussions with some of your lead guys and
we
restructure.
And you know what the crazy part is? I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but like usually I'm thinking I got to have hard talks with guys and it comes down to money. Guys are like, well, then we're out. I had 3 conversations with guys that we had to lower their wage for a period of time, at least as a marker till we can get back to where we need to go. And I expect each one of those guys to say, hey man, it's been nice knowing you, but I'm out. And, the most powerful thing is each one of them says, I'm not going anywhere. And the one guy says, listen, man, I get it. He's like, but I see where you're going and I want to be there the whole way. And that was just a huge confirmation to me, like, okay, we're doing something right here. Not that I want to take wages from anybody. But in that structure, I realized that we had to do something. We had to figure out how we were going to do this, and we had to figure where guys could get back to a place. And those guys admitted it. Like, yeah, we've taken our foot off the gas here a bit. And it kind of helped me reevaluate too. Like when I'm giving pay structure, I need to have a structure behind that. This isn't just like, hey, I feel good today and the economy's great. Here's some extra dollars. It's like, what's this going to look like so that we can have guys earning what they need to be earning, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but like pushing them into a direction where they're owning this thing and then being complimented by lifestyle or by money because of it. So yeah.
It sounds like when you're talking about the vision for like educating people, doing apprenticeship and everything.
Yeah.
Because you're right. We had a conversation before about how frustrating the apprenticeship program is at least in Kelowna.
Sure.
For when I did it.
Yeah.
And how much it felt to me like the teacher was only teaching because they couldn't work anymore. And they hated being a teacher. They didn't want to be there.
It's good.
And they really didn't like me asking questions. And in the stage of life I was in, Luke and I were doing our business and I felt like I need more confidence. Luke had way more experience than me. And I'm like, I want to learn.
Yeah.
And the teacher just didn't want me to ask questions. It just was a total jerk and didn't want to engage me. So when you're talking about your experience in, developing this vision for training people, but also simultaneously learning, being forced to learn, I got to think things a different way. I got to approach this a different way. I can't lead the show all the time in regards to physically pounding walls together, like move over, let me show you how to do it type of attitude.
Yeah.
What it seems to me you're describing is learning and experiencing this giant hole in the apprenticeship experience, I think, in Canada, which is mentorship. You're moving from just providing, read this book, do the test, here's your ticket. You're actually looking at a person as more than just another guy on the crew who's going to make you dollars. You're actually investing them in as a person. And that, as far as our experience, we've worked with a lot of the same people. That's not something you get. When you go work on those framing crews we experienced, you are treated at a value that nobody wants to be treated.
Mm.
And you sense it, you feel it. And I know for me, it got to a point where I just was physically nauseous thinking of going to work every day.
Right.
And for you to describe, hey, I want to work hard. I love this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you lead with a passion. Other people see that. But then when you go and you say, I believe in you as a person, and I want to have you not only, succeed and grow on your own, but I want to bring you into this vision and have you multiply the vision.
Yes.
So that unique individual brings a new color to a vision you couldn't have experienced before.
Yep.
That empowers people to bring, and you're experiencing it. Someone is empowered, they bring something new, and it grows beyond what you ever could have imagined. That mentorship in people is an empowerment that is completely missing, at least in my experience from the trade. Because as we talked before yesterday, I felt like when Luke and I parted ways, my feeling was like, this isn't my passion. You love this. I don't know. And I had to go off on my own little journey and do all kinds of other things. And I've done so many different things in my life. Like I'm 44 and I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. And I feel sometimes really overwhelmed by that. Like I don't know what I'm doing. But when you describe and share the story of like what you're doing and your passion, when you say framing is for me, this is exactly what I love and I'm passionate about it. I can do it. You mentioned people wanting to teach you. Like the experience of having somebody excited to teach you is very important and life-giving. And then for you to go through the struggle and the trials and pull people in, and now you're getting life from investing in mentoring people, it multiplies the empowerment.
Right.
And it makes me want to come and work for you. But I think that's a testament of like how trades has so many like gaping holes.
Sure. Because
we've talked before with different people about how trades is treated as like, you're only doing that because you can't go to university. You're not smart enough. Like you experienced in school and everybody's mad at you because you can't learn that way. And it's ridiculous because everybody learns differently.
Totally.
And so trades for me had this mixed bag of like with the guys we worked for. I'm like, I hate my life working for you. And to work for someone who instead sees it as, no, you're a person beyond the hours we're at work together, and I'm going to invest in you as a person and bring you into the vision. That really, I think, for somebody like me, could have been a path into a career I would have never chose for myself.
Well, and just going off what you said there, because I think this is actually part of the missing hole, and it's something I realized too, and my wife helped me see this, is that because I didn't do well in school, I actually believed for a very long time that I wasn't a very smart person.
Yeah.
And so when I bring these guys in and they couldn't figure this out, I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? Like, I've got this figured out. And I am not a smart person. Like, you can do this. And I think that there has been a stigma for more years than we've even been alive that trades are for people that aren't as smart. The thing is, people that are in trades, they learn at a way different way. Like we're picture thinkers. We're like, I've worked with so many guys that have like photographic memories. Like they blow the socks off. Like I got to look at a plan 4 times. They looked at it once and they've already snapped up the whole floor. And it just like blows my mind. But because of that, the processes have gone away to how to teach it.
Yeah.
And if you're not someone who's just going to take to it like duck like water, then you're probably not going to, unless you're going to figure out a different way to learn this. And that's why I'm seeing a whole different generation come up that are learning off of YouTube and all these different things, because they're seeing things and they're really good candidates for construction, but they don't learn the same way as some of us, like the old guys did. And we can call ourselves some of the old boys now too. And we saw it different, but we didn't necessarily know how to teach it. And so when I started coming to this new thing, all of these guys, I was panicking a little bit because I'm like, okay, well, we got to do like employee reviews and we got to do all this things. And I got this business mentor and he's like, whoa, John, pump the brakes. You got 20 guys. You telling me you're going to go around and try to figure out how everybody's doing every month? He's like, what are your leads there for?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, some things clicked. He drew me this graph and he says, how many guys can you sustainably run on a crew? And I said, 5. He says, can you do 5 sustainable? I said, 5 in the right pecking order, yes. I cannot run 5 green guys.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I can run 5 guys in the right demographic. I could have a lead. I could have 2 mid-level framers, and I could have 1 labor. I said, that crew of 5 I can run and I can do really well. He said, okay, that's how you structure your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You have 1 really good guy.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to entrust him with how many you think he's fit. You're going to have 2 mid leaders. You're going to trust them with what you think they're fit. And you're going to have 1 entry leader, and you're going to trust them with 1 guy.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to build into those 5 guys. You're not building into the 20 guys anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was an eye opener for me. And unfortunately, that was January this year, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. But
and I was like, okay.
But you have the natural inclination to have a heart for people.
Sure.
And already you're mentioning the guys that stick out to you are guys who also have that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can teach you how to use the tools.
Yeah.
But to teach you how to treat people, that's harder. And the ability for somebody, like you even mentioned, the ability to be coachable is, okay, the whole framing environment that we grew up in is not a teachable environment unless you can develop that thick skin and be like, this guy's literally yelling at me, throwing things, and I'm supposed to just not let that bother me.
Oh yeah.
And I'm too thin-skinned
Sure.
to be able to look past that. And there were definitely moments where I stood up to bosses. I'm like, you cannot treat people like this.
Yeah.
In the risk of being fired.
Sure.
But they're so lost it that they couldn't even comprehend that I'm standing in the way, and they would just walk off throwing sledgehammers.
Right.
And that environment is just so toxic.
Right.
But some guys can be in that environment. They're not swayed by it, and they can manage. And I always really, really struggled with it. But the ability to see people, see how to work with people when somebody's struggling through and learning, like your ability to come alongside a guy and say, I'm going to have to drop your wages, and we're going to have to work on this because we need to improve it. And for them to reply with, I'm in, is evidence
Sure.
that they feel safe, like they feel valued, they feel part of it, that they're building something meaningful and worthwhile.
And just to mention, all those guys that had to drop their wages, they're all back up.
Yeah.
Like it was a period. We marked a period of time, and we reevaluated after that period of time. And what I had to do in that period of time is I actually had to figure out where I was going to put them so that the value that they had made sense in where the company was. And each one of those guys that were in kind of a broken definition are now in a lead position and managing, like I said, that same structure I told you. One of those guys I had that conversation with is managing 1. Mm-hmm. 2 of those other guys were mids, and they're managing 3. Mm-hmm. And one of those other guys is managing 4. And you know what? It's interesting, and it's cool to see and cool to watch. I
think so much of that, comes down to the motivation for why we're leading and what we're saying. Because I think so many people in the trades that are in positions of leadership are motivated by insecurity and by fear. Yeah. So yeah, sure, I want you to get better. I want to train you, but it's so that we make more money and I look better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like the motivation for that, I think is so crucial. So I know for me, just the way that I'm wired, if I don't feel like I've been a reasonably decent steward of my responsibilities, I can't sleep. It just eats at me. Like I hate it. So when I'm working with someone and I'm trying to build into them, like I talked about in other podcasts and mentioned to you before, that a point in my career where I had to kind of very intentionally step away and really empower my 2 lead guys, give them responsibility, go through that season where we're not really making money. Sure. It's investment. Yeah. But I'm like, this is so that they can develop over 6 months confidence to then supervise guys. And now I can support them, supporting a couple guys who are supporting a couple guys. And we've got this whole system in place now where it flows from the top down, and got to a position where I could show up on site on their jobs and simply say, how can I help?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, can I go strip braces?
Sure.
And sheet the roof? And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, sweet, Luke's here. Yeah, go take care of that. Do that timber work. And they're running the crew. Like that, to get to that stage is so gratifying. And you actually get to sit back and observe this harmonious situation because they understand that your motivation for it is out of stewardship for them and building into them to see genuine growth.
Yeah.
And it's for their betterment. Otherwise, you know, if it's, you can say all the same things. I want to teach you. It's like when you say you walk onto any job site and you can be, everyone wants to teach you.
Yeah. I know.
Well, why do they want to teach you?
Yes.
You know, and there's times in place where when I was running a crew of 5 guys, so like you're talking about, I typically would set it up so I'm cutting plates, I'm laying out,
Yeah.
and I would try to get quick enough that I could then also sheet walls.
Yeah.
So I'm laying out as quick as I can. I got my lead hand guy is cutting parts, and then there's 2 guys banging up walls, and then I'm sheeting, and we're just chasing each other around. And there's times when the guys who are on the framers, on the nailers, would come up to me and be like, hey, this jack is too whatever. How's this go? I'm like, don't talk to me. That's Chad. He's cutting. Talk to him.
Yeah.
Like you defer that they talk to the person above them.
Yeah.
And if they have an issue, they talk to me. And it isolates all of those interactions so that you stay efficient. People stay in their lane. And I still want to be approachable.
Yes.
And there's a time and a place where I'm like, okay, if we're on break and you have some other questions, like, why are you laying out the way that you are and how does this work? I'm happy to have those discussions. But we're in the thick of chasing each other around the job site. You stay in your lane, you ask the person that's directly above your head, and then we work together. And then every once in a while, stand up and look around. I'm like, we're hauling ass.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
awesome. I'm
Yeah.
exhausted,
Yeah.
but look at us go.
Yeah.
You know, and it's super, super fun. So that underlying motivation, you know, I think we share a lot of the similarities in that. You know, I know for me, there's this sense of imposter syndrome. You know, like I want to be viewed by people as being adequate, but I don't feel that I'm adequate.
Yeah.
You know, in myself. You know, to what degree do you execute to a level that's acceptable? You know, for us, our company being called Akribis Construction at the time, well, we're not providing perfection. That's impossible. The materials aren't perfect enough, and my mind isn't perfect enough to provide perfection, but I can shoot for it. I can be on a journey towards it, and then I can sleep at night knowing, you know, every job I did, I'm like, I did the best I could do.
Yep.
I look back at some of my early jobs now, I'm like, jeez, that was.
I live in one of my earlier jobs.
You know, and then the common saying on the site too is like, common sense isn't so common. Like,
Sure.
you guys are a bunch of dummies. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Common sense is built on experience and on knowledge.
Yes.
Your common sense grows the more details that you're aware of and your greater understanding of the job. And you get people who, like, from their limited perspective, reinvent the wheel. They do something, they think they're helping you, and you're like, what did you do? You cut all the.
But you're talking about failure and what your definition of like what a mistake is.
Sure.
And I mean, I know the way my brain works. If I'm worried about making a mistake, I'm screwed.
Oh man, I got to tell you, there's this guy we had. He's not with us anymore, but we were doing the job for my previous business partner because he moved on and he started a home construction business and did really well for himself. And he hired me for 2 one-offs that were pretty far away from him to frame. But he's so tight with his takeoffs. Like, I'm talking, like, he even texted me how to cut the floor sheets, the pattern that he had figured out so that there wouldn't be any waste. And I'm like, are you for real, man? Like, I got. So, you know, obviously I didn't show the guys the pattern that he texted me, but I'm like, guys, we don't have nothing to waste. If we waste anything, it's coming out of our pockets. I just said that like it's coming out of our pockets. I wasn't going to take it out of anybody's pocket. But I had this one guy, he refused to cut a sheet.
Yep.
He refused to cut a sheet. He's like, no, actually, he got better than that. He refused to cut a sheet, and then he says, hey, this is the best. Can we take a collection at lunch of all of our spare cash so that we can go buy some sheets so that we don't have to have this pressure?
Yes.
And I was like, what have I done? I'm like, dude,
Yes.
listen, just sheet the floor.
Yeah.
It's okay. I was just trying to say we don't have enough to make mistakes. I wasn't saying that, you know, we got to go buy some sheets with our spare cash money.
But the pressure is too, for some people, like some people thrive on pressure.
Sure.
They like that. Okay, I gotta hyper focus.
Yeah.
And they like being in that zone. But I know for me, if I know that there's pressure, and especially if somebody's watching me, I can't even think. All I'm thinking about is you and whatever you're thinking. I have no space left in my brain to actually think. I'm just, what are you thinking? How are you processing this move? And that paranoia is
Sure.
just, there's zero room, which I'm actually reading a book on restoring creativity.
Okay.
And a person can't actually be creative, like another word for that would be like productive, if their only thing in their brain is criticism. So there's actual processes that you can do. It's like a discipline you can do that they describe as the pages. So you get up in the morning and you write 3 pages. Who cares what it is? Doesn't matter. You're going to wake up every morning and you're going to write 3 pages. You can write, I don't know what to write, for 3 pages. Doesn't matter. The purpose is, and that's really resonated with me because I am very constantly self-criticizing. And to do the 3 pages is about allowing yourself the process of that critic to show up and say, why would you write that? That's so dumb. Why are you rhyming? This isn't poetry. You're an idiot. Why are you're not a poet. Why are you writing this nonsense?
Right.
Somebody's going to read this and think you're such an idiot. Oh, so-and-so is going to read that. So-and-so is going to, and you just keep going for 3 pages and you do it. And when you're done, the critic has nothing to say because I did the thing I set out to do.
Yeah.
And it's done and it's over with and no one else is going to read that. And it allows your brain to process through the criticism and be able to set it aside. And I know especially when it comes to construction, I've done it for about 8 years in lots of different types of construction. And I find every time I go to do something, I will like walk around in circles because I'm like, oh, I'm going to go grab the saw. No, I should actually do that. No, I have no ability to get the criticism of doubting every move I make out of my head to be clear-minded, to just enjoy it.
Sure.
But it's that criticism that kills the creativity.
Well, it's funny. Luke talked about his favorite place on a 5-man crew was laying out, cutting plates, and then if he had time, jumping on sheeting. See, I know that method too. We were taught that method, whether we were taught it subconsciously or consciously, we know that method. But when he was talking about it right now, it clicked as to why we do that method. I don't know if Luke knows why we do that method, but it clicked as to why we do that method because we were taught subconsciously, not consciously, we were taught subconsciously that as the lead of that place, we never wanted to put ourselves in a place where we would be messing up the flow of the natural process. Sheeting the walls at the end means it's the last thing in the stage, which means we grab everybody together and we stand on that wall, which clears up more floor space. And if the right wall is done in the right timing, that means we can start playing out interiors before they keep on going.
So fun.
Right?
I miss that so much.
Right. And we know this, and we know that, but we know that if we jumped on and grabbed the nailer, one of those guys is going to jump on and grab sheeting. And if one of those guys starts grabbing sheeting, then the whole thing's going to be messed because now he's going to be like not sure what to do once it's done sheeting. We're going to be pounding away on a nailer, trying to keep ahead of this guy sheeting. He's not actually coming to sheet. Now we got 3 walls on the ground. And so like, it's funny because, but we don't take time necessarily. This is what I was talking with my partner, even on this trip. I'm like, we got it. And he actually came up with this. He says, maybe we don't have to make a process in the whole thing, but we need to take certain things that we do and build a process around it. And it just blew my mind because I'm like, you're right. There's so many things. And even in building a wall that we could probably make a 3-part video series on it so that guys could just learn how to do it, why we do it in the order that we do it. And it's not just up because this is why I say it is, it's because we've thought about so many aspects of what it carries.
Every detail has been scrutinized.
Yes.
And not to say there might not be a better way.
Sure.
But at this point, this is the best that this will work and this is why we do it. Yeah. It's fascinating too because in the midst of that whole environment, the other wild card reality is that you have all these different personalities.
Oh yeah,
working together, right? So you have this like idealistic perfection of like the job site scenario, and then you put together introverts, extroverts, people who are like hugely self-confident, like all these different personalities. So it's fascinating actually, as you were talking, like you and I are quite a fascinating petri dish when it comes to different types of personalities, working relationships, and friends.
Sure,
because like Dustin and I, we've been very close friends for a very long time. I've mentioned this before, we typically get together every Friday night, he and his wife, me and my wife, and we play games and have some drinks and hang out and do life together and laugh and cry and work through things and all of that. And Dustin and I are incredibly different. And given my tendency to micromanage
Sure.
and create systems and want to better stuff, I'm endlessly looking at the environment in front of me. How can we modify and tweak this? What can we do to improve it? And then the responsibility I put on myself, like, this is my name going out there. This is our reputation on the line. I want to be a good steward of what we're doing. It matters to me what people think to a degree. And then you throw someone like Dustin into the mix, who's like hard on himself,
Right.
worried what I'm thinking about him. You know, I can very easily cripple Dustin to where he's just like, I freaking hate this.
Yep.
I'm unsure of, I think I have a perspective of what I want to do. And then I've got this weight of you looking over my shoulder all the time. So, you know, our situation environment in here is like this dance of me trying to be understanding and sensitive, and respectful to him, to let him do what he does that he's great at, give him some kind of guidelines. And then also, when things are appropriate, we're in a healthy place, to be able to ask some questions. Hey, so I understand.
Yeah.
Why are we doing these few things this way? Before I just come and say, I don't want you doing that.
Yeah.
Like, let's explain to me where you're coming from. Okay, I hear, I understand, that's your perspective. Okay, so now from my perspective, and we try to come together in a place where we can have a perfect or a better understanding of each other's perspectives, so that we can then agree somewhere in the middle in a place that will work for both of us. At the end of the day, you know, as the owner of the company, you know, I have this right or whatever to like
You
say,
have a
this
veto
is
card.
a veto card. I can play this trump card, but
Yeah.
I try so hard to never ever go there,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
So that I can respect where he's coming from, and in the end of the day, I can say, here are the kind of big picture perspective. Here's where I want to go, and hopefully I can kind of keep your mind out of the weeds, and we can push forward in these areas. Here's the things I want to focus on at this time. Here's the things that are back burner that I'm not saying aren't valuable. And every couple of weeks, we try to relook at that list. I try to stay in touch. And at the same time, there's this like inner critic in me. I'm like, I'm dropping the ball. I'm blowing it. There's all these probably to-dos I should be doing. So I'm constantly trying to check in with him and check in with Christy, his wife, my production manager in the back, and with Aaron, and that whole pecking order to be like, am I being a good steward? You know, is there enough margin for me to be a good steward? You know, how much more do I need to back away and pass on other things so that I can actually be an asset versus just like this basket stress case who flies off the handle too easy, right? So you put all those dynamics together, and it can either be a hot mess, or if there's appropriate vulnerability, trust, accountability, and grace for one another, it can be fantastic.
I think the key word is trust. You know, when you paint the picture of the idyllic framing crew,
Sure.
I'm picturing myself not knowing anything, right?
Okay.
Like you're the new guy on the crew.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're grass seed, and you're banging a wall together, and you have no idea you can't visualize even what this wall is going to do.
That's right.
And you don't necessarily, as a leader, have time to give the person the whole thing, the whole big picture. But I remember different moments of different crews, people saying, you're just going to have to trust me. You're just going to have to trust me. And that works for a little bit. But if you feel like you can't trust the guy, like he's just going to turn around and yell at you because you didn't do it their way, and you still don't know why I'm doing it that way, the trust piece is so important. And I think in your stories, talking about guys taking hard news and being able to stick with you, the only reason they're going to stick with you is because they trust you.
Right.
And they're able to trust you through things like going through hard times together, suffering, you making mistakes. How do you handle making a mistake in front of people? Do you just blame it on other people? Do you lose your temper and run off? The way you build trust is actually through making mistakes, and no one's ever expecting perfect. Perfect isn't even real. So for you to make mistakes well as a leader builds trust in other people, so they can feel like, oh, okay, I'm going to make a mistake. It's okay if I make a mistake because I'm going to grow. We're going to grow. And man, that vision of all of us standing those walls together, that's awesome. We all come together. We stand the wall. Woo! Now we're doing the interiors. Woo! Floor. Yeah. And that vision of like, we're building this house. Isn't this awesome?
Yeah.
But so often in the way I was trained, that reality felt so hard to receive and get. It was like people didn't understand how to pass that on to me.
You know, it's funny, Luke, you're talking about all these different personalities, and you're bringing on an idea there of the vision. And remember one time I had this really good guy, and I didn't know if I was gonna be able to keep him or not. And I actually wasn't able to keep him. It's fine. He's a close friend of mine still to this day. And but for him, like, he was a fast learner, but he wanted more. And I remember talking to someone like, man, how do I get this guy bought in? Like, it's not money. It's not even learning. Like, the guy learns faster than anybody I've ever had for a long time. And then it clicked for me. I realized for him his vision. What are we doing? And for him, it wasn't just building a house. And we were doing this particular infill, and it was on Alberta Avenue. It was a pretty rough part of Edmonton. And it just hit me. I said, guys, the bigger vision of this house is, as every single one of these infills that we build is frustrating as they are, we're cleaning up the streets in Edmonton. I said, this is one less crack house in Edmonton. You know, and for him, with his past that he had, that meant everything. He'd come out of a pretty hard past, and for him, seeing a street like this getting cleaned up, that gave him everything to want to build this house with excellence, with speed, with intentionality. It blew my mind. I was like, for me, it's just another house. But for him, something clicked. And you know, like I said, we don't frame together anymore, but like, you realize that as you learn with these different individuals, like, man, like, you got to learn the people. If you don't learn the people, it's really difficult to share the vision that's going to work for them. You have to have your own vision. You need to know what you're going and what you're doing. I think sometimes I've lacked that. But then when you are being able to share a vision with people where they can get on, they have to buy into a piece of vision. If they're going to buy fully into yours and know what yours is, they got to buy into why they're doing this for them.
You got to translate it for them, because you're going to speak that vision 1,000 different ways.
Sure.
And I know, me thinking now at 44 back to a career of framing, I'm like, this is not for me. I'm out of here. But I could picture going with the right group of guys that do what we're describing.
Yeah.
I'd be thrilled to go and build some stuff. It'd be like, this is awesome.
It comes back to me a lot too, with that the correct healthy environment. I compared a lot to raising kids, because like, I thought about having kids since I was really young. I couldn't wait to be a dad at some point. And I thought, I'll have 2 boys, like me and my brother, like my dad and mom had, be the same. That'd be good. And I'll raise them the same. I'll do all these things. And, you know, fast forward a bunch of years, I've got 4 kids, and I'm working with my kids. I'm going to be a consistent, reliable dad. And there was a moment where it kind of clicked to me, where my kids don't receive, I can't be the same person to each one of my kids.
Yeah.
You know, one kid, you know, after some stern discipline, we're like, Dad, I didn't even cry.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, made no impact. No, this isn't anything awful, but I would just like, I haven't actually created any change. They've just they've just been tough and dealt with it. Another kid, I can be like, give them like a disappointed little look, and they break down and cry. I'm like, oh, this one's super sensitive. This one's incredibly resilient and stubborn. And for me to be a correct, respectful, honoring parent to each of them means I have to actually deal with each of them differently. That doesn't mean it's not fair.
Sure.
It means that I'm respecting them for who they are, giving them what they need, being sensitive to that. Now, that requires way more energy and work on my part.
Yeah.
But that allows me, again, to be like a good steward of my relationship with those kids. And on a job site, it's the same thing. To some degree, you have to embrace a level of vulnerability to give those people what they need for who they are and how they're wired.
Yeah.
But that takes way more energy. And you can't do that with 20 people. Like you say, that's a much smaller number of people that you can actually do that with. So again, going back to your crew of like 28 people, like I got 5 people that I can cater to, I can be specific with, and then I want them to have that same catering sensitivity to their 5 people, and so on.
Yep.
You know, and our margin for that is different. So to really be a good steward of our relationships means a willingness to be vulnerable and gracious, you know, beyond just being, I'm going to be the same across the board, same with everybody.
You know what's funny? I was just having a conversation with a guy. I love this guy so much. He's one of those guys that's been with us 7 months and just like acing it, but crazy hard on himself, like insanely hard on himself. Well, I got a call from him just on Wednesday, and it was like 4:00, and I had an appointment at 7, and he says, or it was actually at 5, and he says, hey, what do you know about cars? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he'd broken down on the side of the road, and I knew I couldn't just leave the guy there. Like, I mean, my guys, I have, like I said, 20-some guys, these guys aren't all calling me, but when they do, I have to answer. Because they've already been trained. They know who to call their leads. They know who to call all these different things. Like, I don't have 20 guys ask me how to frame a wall. So if they're calling me, it's because they're calling me for who I am. They're calling me for my, like, and that's part of my responsibility. And so I went out and, whatever. It ended up being a bigger problem. His transmission was leaking like a sieve, which then had overheated and then overheated his cooling lines, but then overheated his radiator. So it was bigger trouble. Anyway, fortunately, the truck is probably still drivable, but I drove him home and he called the tow truck and whatever. And we're driving home and we're talking about life. We're talking about framing and I realized something. And it was actually really cool because a person that I used as the example, he knew. And this guy's been, I don't know him that well, but every time I get together with him, I love him. He's a really cool human being. And he's a worship pastor at one of the churches here in Leduc. And we were doing the backstage or all the backdrops for our kids' grade 8 play together because they were in the same class. And he came up and he's just full of energy. We're about the same age. And I was kind of leading it just because of the construction side of things. And he says, I am an incredible second. Where can you put me? And I loved that. And I was like, man, I love that he knows that he's an incredible second. I love that he knows the value in an incredible second. And I love that he knows how to tell people he's an incredible second. And I said to this young guy that I was driving home, I said, you know what? If the only message that this company that you're with, my company, gives is the only way that you grow as an individual or a construction is you become a leader, something's wrong. I says, if we also tell you that you don't need to lead, something's wrong. I believe that every aspect of someone in our company, there's leadership. But what you're leading, if you think that the only way you're going to get to a place of top pay is that you have to lead 5 guys, something's wrong. I says, dude, and I mentioned this guy. He's like, oh, I love that guy. And I said, I told him that same story. And I says, I believe you are an incredible second. And I says, and I think as you learn how to be this incredible second, you're going to start seeing where the vision for yourself is because you're overwhelmed right now with this idea that in 5 years, you're supposed to be doing what your lead is doing. And I said, but that's sometimes I think where as the owners, we have to see where these guys are and be like, hey, we're going to direct your vision a little bit. Because if you think that you're going to be that guy, you're going to bomb yourself out.
We do them a disservice.
100%.
But second is first loser. That's the hard part, right?
That's what we've been taught.
It's culturally, second is first loser.
We just described a picture of framing that you haven't framed now for 20 years and like, I want to go frame.
Yeah.
And but that's made up of a lead, an incredible second, 2 really good mids, and a laborer that eats it up and wants to be there. Right? And what we get lost in is we're like, well, that's great. That's a 5-man crew. Well, how do we and I learned this with even the crew we were on. There was elements of that. We would bring those pods together and we would separate those pods. And there was times that it worked and times that it didn't work as well. And sometimes it was conscious, sometimes it was subconscious. And sometimes too, you create a model that looks great on paper and then doesn't quite work perfectly. And all of a sudden you're building a wall that is like a tall wall and it's 20 feet. And it doesn't involve all of those people to do it that way. And you got to figure out how to reconstruct. And one of my leads, he said this best metaphor and I love it. He's like, if you're a framer, you're a Swiss Army knife. And I'm like, that's so true. But in order to learn how to use a Swiss Army knife properly, you learn how to use the individual tools on the Swiss Army knife, knowing that all of the tools on the Swiss Army knife are not precision tools. So it's like you need it,
Except
you use
for
it.
the toothpick. That's precision.
Yes, the toothpick. Forgot about the toothpick. That's awesome. The white toothpick.
I think that's a great analogy of tradesmen in general.
Yes,
that's so very true.
Yeah.
I think we could go on for ages and ages here, but I think we've kind of covered a lot of the meat of what we wanted to, and maybe we'll just have to do it again.
It's awesome. It's
great.
been fun.
Yeah,
so good.
Keep doing what you're doing. That is meaningful.
That
meaningful.
future you've kind of laid out of like what you're trying to do and the training and working with the apprenticeship kind of support and everything it's phenomenal. So great.
Cool.
So thanks so much for coming out.
Hey,
we'll
thanks
do
for
it
having
again.
us.
Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Take care. Thanks again.